welcome to Chapter 8 of our Wuthering Heights exploration. So we'll go straight into the next chapter. And again, remember to like and comment and subscribe and such other things, and notification bell, as we are chugging through nicely now as we're on to Chapter 8. Anyway, let's have a look. So if you remember what happened last time, Lockwood wanted to hear more about what happened. He didn't want any details to be skipped. So we are getting these extra details now. So it's skipping ahead now to the summer of 1778. And we hear about the birth of, this is Hareton, who Lockwood had encountered right in the first chapter, actually. No, was it the second chapter? And he'd encountered them at Wuthering Heights. And Hareton was one of the residents, and he was the grumpy young man there as well. And he's described there as the last of the ancient Earnshaw stock. Now, we don't need to dwell too much on this, but you can see there's more deaths here in the novel. There's a lot of death in the novel, because Frances, the wife of Hindley Earnshaw, she's on her way out here, basically. So it's described as she's having consumption, which is tuberculosis. So Nelly is going to be caring for young Hareton. And actually as well, there's another little sub-narrator here, because we're getting an account from, basically it's just the girl that usually brought our breakfasts. So let's just call her Breakfast Girl. So we have another little miniature narrator here who's easily forgotten, but we shall now henceforth refer to her as Breakfast Girl. So we get an account of the birth and what Dr. Kenneth said, who is the local doctor, and what he said to Hindley and Frances, and her outlook isn't good, and that annoys Hindley. He's upset at the idea of that. So then Nelly's effectively going to bring up baby, and you also have as well Bronte making it clear Hindley and his own character flaws there. He had room in his heart only for two idols, his wife and himself. He doted on both and adored one, and I couldn't conceive how he would bear the loss. So he is very dependent on Frances. That's the only joy that Hindley actually has in his life, apart from his own selfishness, basically. So doomed. She does die. So there you go. So she put her two hands about his neck, her face changed, and she was dead. So she wasn't a big deal of a character anyway, but she's important for, she now triggers Hindley's own spiral into despair and grief, and he never recovers from this. Hindley never gets out of this at all. So Hindley becomes so violent and angry and disagreeable, basically. The servants could not bear his tyrannical and evil conduct long. Joseph and I were the only two that would stay. So he scares everybody off. So this is also the beginning of the decline of Wuthering Heights as a house, effectively, as the status of the Earnshaw. So we know we've got the last Earnshaw is Hareton. So you can see that they're definitely on the decline here. Then his treatment of the latter was enough to make a fiend of a saint. So Hindley is incredibly cruel to Heathcliff. He delighted to witness Hindley degrading himself past redemption. So for Heathcliff as a character, he enjoys, it's that word, isn't it, Schadenfreude, that shameful joy, is the idea of enjoying another's misfortune. And Heathcliff enjoys watching Hindley's decline. And fitting in with the theme of hell that we've had for Wuthering Heights, I could not half tell what an infernal house we had. So it is like a house of hell, effectively. It's not a normal place, particularly now. But we do get these visits from Edgar Linton. This is a good quote for Catherine, an interesting one. At 15, she was the queen of the countryside, so hyperbolic there, or a metaphor as well. She had no peer, and she did turn out a haughty, headstrong creature. Iona did not like her after her infancy was past. So she's not a very pleasant teenager. But Heathcliff does keep a hold on her affections, we learn here as well. And young Linton, with all his superiority, found it difficult to make an equally deep impression. During the course of this chapter, you'll see that change. There is a change, because remember, after Catherine's injury, she comes back and she's much more refined and kind of civilised, and she's not quite the person she used to be, but she's still got her spiteful side, and again, we'll see that in this chapter as well. There's a little reference here to the portrait that's in Thrushcross Grange of Edgar Linton, and there was a portrait of Catherine next to it, but it's been removed. I wonder who might have done that. Could it be someone who now owns Thrushcross Grange and was a bit attached to Catherine? So again, that's Bronte's dropping in a level of intrigue here for us as the reader there, because there's speculation of, I wonder why the painting is missing, the portrait. I want to talk about something on this page first. Oh yeah, so the description of Edgar Linton, so he's described as being, so let's go to the next page. And we have handsome again, and there's that prejudice that we've described as well, because he's more conventionally attractive according to the standards of the era, and there's that prejudice against Heathcliff being darker, and again his ethnicity is unclear. But we have this from Nelly here. I did not marvel how Catherine Earnshaw could forget her first friend for such an individual. I marvelled how he, with a mind to correspond with his person, could fancy my idea of Catherine Earnshaw. So she could say, well, I could see why she would be interested in Edgar Linton and why she'd prefer him to Heathcliff, but I don't get what he sees in her, what Edgar Linton sees in her, basically. And for Catherine's character as well, she adopted a double character without exactly intending to deceive anyone. Actually, I find that quite unlikely. We can talk about Nelly's unreliable narration there. I think she probably is doing it deliberately, but anyway, that's just my view. In the place where she heard Heathcliff termed a vulgar young ruffian and worse than a brute, she took care not to act like him, and at home she had small inclination to practise politeness that would only be laughed at and restrain an unruly nature when it would bring her neither credit nor praise. So she's got a double personality here. So Bronte presents Catherine as having a dual nature, so she's prepared to be quite civilised in the kind of Earnshaw, not the Earnshaw style, the Linton style, and the Earnshaw style of being more rough and suitable with Heathcliff. The behaviour will shift depending on who she's with. So I think that represents a kind of shallowness there to me. I think she's obviously not genuine to herself. Then there is some distance between her and Heathcliff as well. So you can see that she doesn't really want Heathcliff to meet Edgar Linton on his visits. Hindley himself tolerates the visits of Edgar Linton, and he'll keep out of the way to allow the meetings to happen between Edgar Linton and Catherine. So also, when Linton evinced disgust and antipathy to Heathcliff, she dare not treat his sentiments with indifference, as if depreciation of her playmate were of scarcely any consequence to her. So you can see that two-faced nature, that duality there for Catherine as Bronte presents it, where she's quite willing to not defend Heathcliff, or even, I assume, joining in Edgar Linton's criticism of him as well. So there's a big mysterious blob here where the copying's not worked. Don't worry, because I've got it here. Then there's not too much to say, but I thought it was interesting. She did bring herself finally to confess and to confide in me. There was not a soul else that she might fashion into an advisor. So it's important for the way the novel works as well that Nelly is her confidant. So she's not just a narrator, she's obviously a character within the text, and she's a character that Catherine can trust and tell her secrets to. So that's an important element of the character there. This is about Heathcliff's appearance. So the personal appearance sympathised with mental deterioration. He required a slouching gait and ignoble look. His naturally reserved disposition was exaggerated into an almost idiotic excess of unsociable moroseness. He took a grim pleasure, apparently, in exciting the aversion rather than the esteem of his few acquaintance. So he's got a kind of grotty appearance. He's deliberately, slouching. He's making himself seem unfriendly. So as he's been kind of demoted in status, his appearance is actually matching that. He's not really making any effort to rise up about it or show that he's more than that. He's seems to be accepting his role and kind of reveling in it and enjoying upsetting people as well. So it's going to lead to tension between Heathcliff and Catherine. You can see here about, this is Catherine criticising, she's very spoilt here. You've combed my hair quite out of curl. So Catherine now, fashion is important to her, and looking good for Edgar Linton, who's coming in the afternoon. That's really important to her. And look how dismissive she is with Nelly as well. The language that Bronte gives her there. Oh, Nelly, you've combed my hair quite out of curl. So you got those very dismissive exclamatory sentences. Heathcliff has been keeping a record of the crosses are for the evenings you have spent with the Lintons, the dots for those spent with me. Do you see? I've marked every day. Yes, very foolish, as if I took notice, replied Catherine in a peevish tone. And where is the sense of that? To show that I do take notice. So she's obviously spending more time with the Lintons. And you can see the class thing coming on here as well. You've got a sense of that. She doesn't want to spend time with him anymore. You might be dumb or a baby for anything you say to amuse me, or for anything you do either. This is fueling the jealousy and the tension between... So we've had the dual nature of Catherine, but now we're fueling the jealousy and the tension between Heathcliff and Edgar Linton, and Catherine's affections. Where are they lying? What's happening? She's changed as a person, but it's not actually that genuine, but we'll see more of that later on. Again, Nelly's prejudice, as written here, the contrast resembled what you see in exchanging a bleak, hilly, coal country for a beautiful, fertile valley. So Bronte uses antithesis there to compare Edgar Linton with Heathcliff, and again, coal, it's associated with darkness and dirt as well. So again, it's exposing that prejudice there that we've seen before. So Edgar Linton turns up. We have Catherine very much kind of feeling of superiority, and she's actually cruel to Nelly here as a servant as well, and she very much kind of asserts her superior status socially over it, because she doesn't want Nelly to be working in the room where she is with Edgar Linton. But Nelly says, well, actually, the master told me to get on with it, so I'm going to get on with it, and you don't mind me doing that. Basically, Catherine then says, yeah, I do mind. And she actually pinches her. So she pinches Nelly. She pinched me with a prolonged wrench very spitefully on the arm. So we've got some violence here. So Nelly's on the receiving end of some physical abuse here from Catherine. Edgar Linton's never seen this kind of thing before because he's from the civilised world of Thrushcross Grange, but he's getting a glimpse of the real Catherine here. I didn't touch you, you lying creature. So when Nelly says, well, look, you've pinched me, and then she shows the evidence, showing a decided purple witness. So that's a nice bit of personification there. The idea of the bruise is the evidence that she's been pinched. And this isn't normal. You're not meant to be like assaulting servants like that. That's just kind of standards of the era. You just wouldn't do it. Then, just to go even further, she stamped her foot, wavered a moment, and then, irresistibly impelled by the naughty spirit within her, slapped me on the cheek, a stinging blow that filled both eyes with water. So she slaps her there. So more violence there, more abuse of Nelly, more assertion of Catherine's social status there. Then Linton is really shocked as well by this, because it's lying and violence, and he's never seen anything like it. So he actually wants to leave. But also Cathy also shakes Hareton as well, who's only a little child as well, and he was upset because Nelly had been hit. And she also ends up then hitting Edgar, because he's trying to protect everybody. He's trying to pull her away from him. So Edgar, because he's a bit of a weakling really, he decides he's going to leave. Nelly's quite pleased. Take warning and be gone. It's a kindness to let you have a glimpse of her genuine disposition. So Bronte reveals Nelly's thoughts here in this part of the narration of saying, I'm pleased you're seeing the real Catherine now. You'll get an idea of what she's really like. Because remember, we've had this description of her dual nature, haven't we? "Can I stay after you have struck me?" asked Linton. "You've made me afraid and ashamed of you," he continued. "I'll not come again." So off he goes. "And you told a deliberate untruth," he said. And look how sport she is. "I'll cry myself sick." So she's very different now as a character. There's definitely cruelty there. There's definitely cruelty as part of it. But there's this sense of superiority as well. She's obviously not afraid to tell lies. And you actually have Edgar changes his mind and comes back in. So I thought there'd be no saving him. He's doomed and flies to his fate. So he can't resist Catherine's charms. Then Earnshaw comes home rabid drunk. So we've heard about his decline, and this is part of his decline, alcoholism. So Hindley is drinking heavily. And he's also very dangerous as well, because we also find out that Nelly takes the precaution of removing the ammunition from his gun to take the shot out of the master's fowling piece, because Hindley, when he comes home drunk, has a habit of playing with his gun. Don't laugh. As in, dangerously playing with his real gun. So that's why Nelly has to do it. So there's a real sense, Bronte really puts in the chapter, there's a real sense of decline, there's a sense of violence, there's a sense of degradation, as Wuthering Heights, really, the Earnshaw family is really falling apart. It's not going well, is it? But you've also got this other part of it where Edgar Linton is obviously so enamoured of Catherine. There's obviously another strand to the story going on, which is Bronte showing these two characters getting closer. So I'm going to stop there, as we've now reached the end of the chapter. Hopefully you found that useful. I've got the other videos there as well. I've got some on terms you might want to have a look at too. But I hope you found it useful, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.